So we move to the next news video, and we still got a lot to cover, so let's jump into it now. As internally, Gunther is set to break the Honky Tonk Man's long held record as the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion in WWE history. And that record, from the standpoint of Gunther, is set to break. He is set to break the record in September. So if he does hold the Intercontinental title until then, he will be the one to finally defeat the Honky Tonk Man's long-held record, which Honky Tonk Man held the title from, I believe, the summer of '87 until the fall of '88, or something of that variety. Which this goes along well with the idea that WWE wanted to update their record books, which is something that we heard, I believe, about a month or so ago, maybe around there. And the reason why specifically, or one of the reasons why specifically, I chose to include a certain person in this contest is because Tommaso Ciampa, according to, I believe, the Wrestling Observer, or Worked Wrestling, one of the two, Tommaso Ciampa is set to return to the ring very soon, and may have been backstage at Monday Night Raw, at the most recent edition of Monday Night Raw. But the big part of this is that Ciampa, upon his return, it could see the reformation of DIY and one of the best potential tag team feuds in WWE in a very long time. Not only, I mean, it's going to be crazy because it would be two big-time tag team feuds in 1 year. One being, of course, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos, and then the other being Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn for the World Tag Team titles. Both incredible feuds, both incredible rivalries that we never would have expected, because WWE doesn't exactly jump at the opportunities to do tag team feuds that the fans want to see. With that being said, also, next week on Raw, or this coming week on Raw, I would say Seth Rollins issued an open challenge because it has been since November of last year that WWE has had a world title match on Monday Night Raw, and it was Big E who had the last world title match on Raw, November 21st, 2022, and Rollins issues an open challenge to anybody on the Raw roster for a title shot, and the championship match was accepted by Judgment Day member Damian Priest. So Damian Priest will be getting the first opportunity against Rollins for the WWE World Heavyweight title this week on Raw, continuing whatever rivalry was set to start between Rollins and the Judgment Day. It is going to be a very much earned opportunity for Damian Priest, as he has been one of the hardest working people in WWE over the last couple of years. Or over the last year or so, especially since the advent of Judgment Day. With that being said, though, we now slide over to AEW, as we got a lot of AEW news to get to, including I will be updating you in a very special individual video on what to expect from AEW Fight Forever, which is set to finally release. AEW Fight Forever is set to finally release on June 29th, which is the end of this month. So we will finally see we will finally know what to expect from the AEW's first released video game, or first video game release at the end of June. And I will give you guys an update on everything and anything AEW Fight Forever tomorrow in a video. But speaking of updates, the Elite's contract status is still up in the air within AEW, and AEW is set to be taking a more aggressive approach with trying to re-sign the top stars within the company Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, as Kenny's contract is set to expire first. Kenny's contract is set to expire first, and the Bucks are set to expire early next year. But also, Matt Jackson, interestingly enough, was set to have back surgery, but rejected having the back surgery and wanting to work through it to avoid having time added to his contract due to the injury, which is interesting because that keeps his contract status, that keeps his contract set to expire at the exact same time and not sometime later. Or where AEW could add time to his contract because of the missed time. So it is interesting that AEW is now not going, that Matt Jackson wanted to keep that the way it is because it keeps it where the Elite's contracts are up at around the same time. And I'm still going to stick with what I said a few months ago, where I basically insinuated that I thought if anybody would leave AEW, it would be Kenny and the Bucks would stay. Because realistically, I don't see the Bucks leaving. I'm not saying I see Kenny leaving. I'm saying if anybody has the potential to leave or the potential desire to want to test the waters elsewhere, it would be Kenny Omega, because I think that the Bucks would be better off staying in AEW. Not saying that Kenny would not be better. I'm just saying that I could see Kenny leaving and wanting to test the waters in WWE before he retires. As Kenny's contract is set to be expiring at the end of the year. Speaking of contracts, speaking of returns, speaking of updates, I know there's an update that everybody's been waiting for, and the update came a couple of days ago or last week on Dynamite more specifically, that a certain Chicago native will be returning to AEW on June 17th for the premiere edition of AEW Collision, and that person is CM Punk. Punk is set to return to AEW and will be coming back for the first time. And honestly, I think a lot of people are surprised that Punk is actually returning and would not have expected Punk to be back at all. That I think a lot of people are surprised Punk even decided to return, let alone that AEW and him were able to negotiate things and get things back to a certain point to where Punk could return. But props to AEW for being able to get things back to where they are, and the idea that CM Punk could potentially be returning to AEW, or could, I mean, let me rephrase that for a second. That Punk is not potentially returning, that Punk is returning on June 17th. The only thing potentially that we don't know is who Punk could be feuding with, and it is said to be internally it is said that Punk could be returning to feud with the same guys that are now returning, with the same guys that are feuding with his boys, as FTR has recently started a feud with Bullet Club Gold. And Jay White specifically, imagine a feud, a rivalry with Punk and Jay White as Punk's return to AEW. I mean, honestly, that would be incredible and something that I think everybody would be excited to see. That and Chris Jericho, of course, but also it is still rumored that Punk could be returning and at some point feuding with his longtime rival, or his former rival, Samoa Joe. As Punk's initial return match was rumored to be Samoa Joe, and it is still potentially possible to happen, but there is no confirmation on that match happening or not happening as of right now. But all we know is that Punk will be back in Chicago on June 17th for the first edition of AEW Collision. And speaking of returns, both Santana, who sustained a very severe knee injury last year during Blood and Guts, is returning soon, and the bastard, Pac, is said to be returning soon as well, which is, both men have been on the shelf due to injury. I know I believe Santana sustained a severe knee injury last year, and Pac, it is unclear what has kept him on the shelf, but either way, Pac will be returning very soon, and the fact that AEW is set to hold All In the UK at Wembley, I mean, I think that is something that Pac is excited to be a part of, or would be excited to be a part of. So the fact that he'd be returning before then, I mean, it is, it would be completely understandable. But again, as we wrap up this news video as well, tomorrow I will give you guys an update on everything from Fight Forever, or for everything regarding Fight Forever that I know. And 2 weeks from today, June 17th, it is the premiere edition of AEW's new show, Collision, on Saturday, June 17th, from the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. And it is the AEW return of CM Punk. That is something that I honestly never expected to be able to say. On June 17th, Punk is back in AEW. With that being said, though, that is it for the news video. I will see you tomorrow for the video on AEW Fight Forever. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you again soon.